And I've heard Nate talk about. I listened to Nate Land, pretty good podcast. Even when Nate's not on, I like the guys he does it with: Dusty Slay, Aaron Weber, and Brian Bates. And Nate's been on there for a few years, like since he started to get successful. He's been talking about how he wants to make that into a thing that doesn't just showcase clean comedy. Like right now, he has specials from Nick Thune and Steve Rogers and Mike Vecchione and people like that. Greg Warren, these guys who are doing clean material, and he puts it on their YouTube channel to give them a little extra bump. Maybe they don't have the audience or the reach that it would have gotten without Nate's help. He produces the special, puts it on his channel, and it gets more eyeballs on it. So that's been a great thing Nate's been doing for comedy. But now Nate is saying, like, I want to be Walt Disney, which I think is kind of a wild move. Again, if he's a genius, then this could all work out. But I feel like more likely he's getting a little too big for his britches. This could end in utter disaster if he plays his cards wrong here.
I mean, I would go to a comedy-based theme park. I think that would be awesome.
What would that even be, though? What would
Who knows?
You know what I mean? Like, what are the roller coasters?
A lot of bananas everywhere. A lot of people slipping and falling.
There's a whoopee cushion on every seat.
And a lawyer, because lawsuits they be a coming. But I got the thing up here. Comedian Nate Bargatze says Disney has abandoned its audience as he talks about building rival media empire. And he's talking about.
I think that's kind of true. Oh, I didn't watch that Fox News clip. I'm guessing the angle they're taking is like, because Disney's gone woke or whatever.
Happy.
Yeah. I don't even know if that's Nate's. I think that is probably Nate's take to a degree, but I think he's also looking at it saying, like, there are no family-friendly movies anymore. Everything has to be a message, whether it's woke or otherwise. There's a fucking message in everything, and you're not just getting like good family entertainment anymore. I've heard him talk about that a lot, where he wants to make sitcoms and he's making a movie and all that type of shit. So I think he likes a lot of that old school entertainment, or even the specials he puts on his YouTube channel. He refers to them as TV clean. Like, they don't have to be necessarily squeaky clean, but you have to be able to play them on NBC, you know? And I think that is actually interesting, because now there are obstacles to get around in comedy as far as like what's going to get you taken off YouTube or whatever. But there are no like, okay, I have to make this work in a clean package. So Nate putting that kind of back in place is actually interesting. Where he's losing me a little is like, we're going to build a ride. We're going to build the Nate coaster.
So it says about Bob Iger, that guy doesn't care about the audience. So that's kind of his initial take.
And he is right that it's become a business in the sense of like, well, we can like look at that new Avengers movie that came out that was called Thunderbolt. It wasn't making enough money, so they were like, "Fuck it, we'll blow the biggest spoiler in the movie and we'll just call it the New Avengers," which, by the way, is a terrible title. But like, they don't give a shit about entertainment. I don't think that's specific to Disney, by the way. I think that's everyone. I heard this was the most disheartening thing I've heard for comedy in a long time, where Bert Kreischer, we've talked a lot about that Bert Kreischer appearance on We Might Be Drunk. It's come up like 3 weeks in a row now. But on that podcast, he talked about how his special was getting more retention than most Netflix specials. Like, I guess Netflix came to him and said, "Hey, people are watching your special for a lot longer. Do you think there's any specific reason?" And Bert said, "Well, I know people aren't watching hour-long specials as much, so I moved my closer to the middle." And I was like, boy, that is gross.
Or people fell asleep and just didn't turn it off.
That's also possible, Electra.
That's what we count on. That is how.
But the idea that you're now gearing your art, I know, again, we've been talking about gay. I know it sounds very gay to call it that, but if you're gearing your art towards the algorithm, I think that's a terrible sign for comedy. So I like that Nate is pushing back against that a little. I just don't know, and I love Nate as a comic. I don't know if the type of smart that can write a bit about getting served milk with ice at Starbucks, I don't know if that equates to running a business that takes down Disney. You know, I think they're just different types of smart. But we'll find out. I just don't know. Nate's obviously built an empire, and I think when you're making $80 million a year in touring, you start to think like, I don't need all of this money. You know, I made more money in my 1 year than my children will ever spend. So maybe start wasting some of it, I guess. But I don't know. Is there any more in the article?
Well, this is an interesting line, which might go to your point here. He says, Bargatze said the audience is crucial. He views himself as their servant, Esquire reported. None of this happens without them, he said. So
I like that mentality, although I think it's what rich guys start to say to pander to an audience, you know? I worry about that with Nate because he seems like a very down-to-earth guy, but I just think the level of money we're talking about him making, that changes even the most wholesome people. You know what I mean? Like Nate is in these circles now where he's literally hosting the Emmys, you know? I do think for the most part, if you look at like Seinfeld, Gaffigan, some of these people, they seem like they've somewhat kept a level of grounding. You know what I mean? They're not at Diddy parties and shit like that. Like they seem kind of like normal people. Even Chris Rock to a degree. Like it doesn't seem like he's lost himself entirely. But I just think it's hard when you get to that level to not get sucked into Hollywood in some way. I like that he's talking about this. I just don't know if Nate is the guy that's going to change Hollywood. But I like the attempt. I'm torn on how I feel about this.
Well, you know that Chappelle joke, right? Like he got all mad that he wasn't invited to the Diddy parties, and he realized, wait a second, I'm ugly. God damn it! Like,
I mean, Chappelle's a guy who has lost his way. Like Chappelle's a guy that put a C on his chest and started calling himself the GOAT and rambling about nothing for 3 hours and putting the audience through. He'll just get drunk on stage and expect the audience to sit politely through a 3-hour show. So like Chappelle is a guy that's kind of lost himself because he's so successful and has yes men around him. I wonder if Nate is in touch enough. I thought about talking about it a couple weeks ago when the Regs talked about it, because Lewis brought this up that Nate wants to build a theme park. And I think Soder was the one making the point, like, we have to tell him this is ridiculous because that's how you stay somewhat grounded. Like, if you have friends going, what are you, a fucking idiot? You think you're Walt Disney? I think you need a little bit of that, because when you're making $80 million a year, $100 million a year, whatever, you start to have yes men around you, and then you become like Joe Rogan doesn't have anyone to tell him, hey, maybe start interviewing your guests instead of asking every single person about aliens and Epstein and DMT. Not everyone's into your interest, you know?
Mike, I'm going to give you one guess on what Nate Bargatze's Disneyland is called.
Nateland.
That is correct. Nateland.
So I knew that because that's the name of his podcast and his production company. So
okay, well that all makes sense. Branding. He's branding.
Yeah, maybe this is like his dream from childhood. Always wanted to have a theme park.
Maybe.
I see market inefficiency where he's going, right? There's going to be a lot of people that clamor for that sort of anti-Disney family sort of stuff. And man, he could clean up.
I like it. I like it from an I just worry when a guy starts saying theme park. Then I worry about like he's saying like, hey, Bob Iger doesn't care about his audience. I'm like, well, you're already building a theme park in your mind. You've leapfrogged over, like right now the company's producing comedy specials and podcasts. That's what Nateland Entertainment does. They've got a movie in the works. He just put out a book, and I think like eventually they want to make TV shows, sitcoms, stuff like that. He has sprung way over that and gone to theme park. So that's where I'm like, how worried is he about the audience? But I think Nate does look at it, and maybe he's just saying, because again, like I said, some of these headlines were like, Nate Bargatze destroys Bob Iger. So it might be clickbait in a way where they want you to think Nate's got like blood on his mind. Like he's coming for blood. When in reality, he's just like you said, capitalizing on a market inefficiency that he sees. But it is interesting because there's not that sort of clean comedy in TV and movies, like stuff that's good but not filthy. That's entirely gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Or not even filthy, but just like no cursing or anything, like stuff you can watch with your kids. That doesn't exist anymore. The shit on CBS and NBC and all that, it's dog shit. Like there's no one watching it. So it is smart of Nate to try and capitalize like this. I just worry when I hear guys start making the amount of money he's making and then go, I want to build a theme park.
I don't know. Talking market inefficiencies, Mike, a blind theme park, a blind Mike theme park. That would be amazing.
Well, that's fun. Everyone's blindfolded when they come in.
Yeah, it's just
what am I on?
Just a chair and 4 guys to shake a chair.
This is terrifying.
The whole park's just a chair.
I want one where everyone eats mushrooms before they come in. That would be my theme park.
Amazing. Yes.
Yep. My theme park, every step is an adventure. You don't know. You could fall anywhere.
Go to blindmike.net for everything Blind Mike. Look at me. I did it. Krager's did it.